It was a quiet morning in the town, the kind where the sun peeked gently over the rooftops and the streets were mostly empty. Birds chirped softly, and a few early commuters were making their way to work. A woman drove her car along one of the main streets, her hands steady on the wheel. She had a calm presence, the kind that made people feel at ease without even knowing her. Her mind wandered as she thought about her new role and the responsibilities she had just taken on. She had worked hard for this, and now, finally, she was stepping into a position that meant more than just a title. It meant the chance to make a real difference. As she drove, unaware, 2 police cars patrolled the area. The officers inside were alert, scanning the streets carefully. When they spotted her car, they made a snap judgment. Something about the vehicle, the way she drove, or perhaps just the unfamiliar face, made them decide to pull her over. It was a routine stop to them, one of many they made every week, but for her it was about to be an unexpected moment. The officers approached the car cautiously. She rolled down the window, smiling politely, her eyes steady and unafraid. "Good morning, officers," she said. Her voice was calm, warm, and respectful. The first officer, a man in his 40s with a stern expression, leaned down slightly and asked for her license and registration. She handed them over without hesitation. As the officer looked at the paperwork, he frowned, confused. The name on the license seemed oddly familiar, but he couldn't place it immediately. He looked up at her, still unsure. "Do you live around here?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, I just moved into the area this week." Her tone was friendly but firm, the kind of voice that made people listen carefully. The second officer, younger and a little more nervous, shifted from foot to foot. He glanced at his partner and then back at her. "Do you know why we stopped you?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "No, officer. I'm not sure." She kept her hands visible on the steering wheel, making no sudden movements. She could sense the tension, but she didn't let it show in her expression. As the first officer examined her license again, his brow furrowed. Something about her name sparked a memory. "Wait a second. I think I've heard this name before," he muttered. She smiled faintly but didn't say anything yet. She could see the confusion on his face, and instead of reacting with anger or frustration, she remained calm, almost patiently waiting. Finally, he asked her to step out of the car for a moment. She did so with grace, moving slowly and confidently. She noticed how the younger officer avoided eye contact, clearly unsure of how to proceed. The older officer's hands hovered near his belt, a sign of caution. Yet she didn't feel threatened. She understood the weight of their training and the assumptions they had made. She had faced moments like this before, though never quite like this one. Once they were standing near the car, the older officer decided to call the station. "Can you confirm her ID?" "I'm not sure about this," he said into the radio. She stayed quiet, letting them make the call, her posture calm and composed. The younger officer watched her carefully, curiosity and embarrassment mixing in his expression. He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. After a few moments, she broke the silence with a small, measured smile. "I think you might want to call your station before writing that ticket," she said. Her words were simple, but they carried authority. The officers exchanged glances, not sure whether she was joking or serious. The older officer's hand tightened slightly on the radio. Then he spoke again. "Station, this is Officer Reynolds. I need verification on a license." "Yes, that's correct." "Can you confirm her identity?" At the station, the supervisor answered the call and immediately recognized the name. There was a pause on the line, then a brief, stunned silence. "You mean she's our new chief?" the supervisor asked. On the other end, the officers in the street froze. The words sank in slowly as though time itself had slowed. The woman they had just stopped, treating her like any other unknown driver, was the very person in charge of the entire department. Back on the street, the older officer looked at her, then at his partner and finally back at her. His face turned red with embarrassment, a mixture of shock and apology. I'm sorry, ma'am," he stammered. The woman's expression softened, but she didn't scold or humiliate them. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, "It's all right. Mistakes happen, but it's a good reminder for all of us to see people before we judge them." The younger officer looked down at the ground, feeling both relief and guilt. He had acted on assumptions, and now he understood how quickly bias could creep in, even in small, seemingly harmless moments. The woman noticed his discomfort but didn't exploit it. She simply nodded slightly, a gesture that seemed to say, "Let's learn from this and move forward." After a few more moments, the first officer asked her to follow them back to the station. She agreed, walking calmly, her presence commanding yet approachable. As they drove, she noticed the way the officers avoided conversation, clearly still processing the revelation. She didn't need to speak much. Her calm demeanor and steady eyes communicated more than words ever could. At the station, she was formally introduced to the officers who had stopped her. They were polite, respectful, and visibly nervous. She shook each of their hands, her grip firm but gentle. "It's important that we treat everyone with fairness," she said. "Not because of titles, but because it's the right thing to do. Respect is the first step in building trust." Her words resonated in the room, quiet but powerful. Later, as the officers returned to their duties, the younger one whispered to his partner, "I can't believe we just pulled over the chief." The older officer nodded, still processing the lesson. Both had gained more than just a story to tell. They had experienced firsthand the importance of seeing beyond assumptions and acknowledging the humanity in everyone they encountered. The woman, now officially recognized as chief, didn't dwell on the awkward moment. She understood that change wouldn't happen overnight. Some officers would learn quickly, others slowly, but each encounter mattered. She had spent years preparing for this role, and moments like this only reinforced why her work was so important. Her journey to becoming chief had not been easy. She grew up in a neighborhood where trust in law enforcement was scarce. Her family taught her to stand tall, speak her mind, and never let fear dictate her actions. She had witnessed injustice, bias, and unfair treatment firsthand, and it had fueled her determination to make a difference. Becoming chief wasn't just a career milestone. It was a statement that change was possible, that leadership could be both strong and compassionate. Now, standing in the station, she felt the weight of responsibility settle comfortably on her shoulders. She knew that leadership wasn't about asserting power or making others feel small. It was about guiding, teaching, and showing that respect and empathy were not weaknesses but strengths. The traffic stop had been an unexpected test, and she had handled it with grace. The officers had learned, even if just a little, and that was progress. As the morning continued, she reviewed reports, met with staff, and began planning her first initiatives. Yet she couldn't shake the memory of the stop, the initial confusion, the nervous glances, the moment of realization. It was a reminder that assumptions could blind even trained professionals, and that true leadership involved patience, understanding, and the courage to correct mistakes without anger. Her story was already spreading in whispers among the community. People began to hear about the woman who had faced bias calmly, who had risen through the ranks despite obstacles, and who now led with integrity. It was a story that carried hope, especially for those who felt overlooked or underestimated. It was a story about resilience, grace, and the power of human connection. The day moved forward, and the streets began to fill with cars and people. She drove through the town again later, observing the familiar sights with a sense of purpose. Every interaction, every glance, every decision mattered. She knew that building trust between the department and the community would be a long journey, but it was one worth taking. She had faced moments like the traffic stop before, and she would face them again, each time with patience, understanding, and a commitment to justice. By the end of the day, she reflected quietly on the events that had unfolded. She had experienced a moment of discomfort, witnessed the limits of perception, and yet managed to transform it into a teaching opportunity. Leadership, she realized, wasn't about avoiding mistakes. It was about how you responded to them. Her presence had already started to shift perspectives, and she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that small actions could lead to meaningful change. She left the station that evening with a calm sense of determination. There would be challenges ahead, difficult conversations, and moments of tension. But she was ready. Her journey had taught her resilience, and her experiences had prepared her for moments just like this. She knew that the path she was on wasn't easy, but it was necessary, and it was worth every effort. As the sun set over the town, casting warm light across the streets, she drove home slowly, thinking about the days ahead. Her story had only begun, and every step mattered. Moments like the traffic stop weren't just embarrassing or awkward. They were opportunities to teach, to lead, and to change hearts. And she was ready to do all of it, one calm, patient, and thoughtful step at a time. The next morning, The sun rose gently over the town, spilling soft light across the streets and rooftops. The woman woke early, as she always did, with a sense of purpose humming quietly in her chest. She had slept just a few hours, thinking about the events of the previous day, the traffic stop, the moment of recognition, the awkwardness she had handled so calmly. It lingered in her mind. She understood that what had happened was more than a simple encounter. It was a reminder of the work that lay ahead, the lessons that needed to be learned, and the trust that had to be built. She dressed in her uniform carefully, straightening her badge with a sense of pride and responsibility. Each pin, each emblem on her uniform carried meaning. They were not just symbols. They were reminders of her journey, the obstacles she had overcome, and the people she had vowed to serve and protect. She glanced at herself in the mirror for a moment, her reflection calm and steady. She knew that the day ahead would be important, not because of meetings or paperwork, but because of the human connection she was about to nurture. When she arrived at the station, the atmosphere was noticeably different from the previous day. Word of the traffic stop had already spread quietly among the officers. Some exchanged cautious glances, whispering to one another. Others avoided eye contact, unsure how to approach the new chief after what had happened. She noticed it all but did not let it distract her. Her focus was on creating an environment where respect, understanding, and accountability were the foundation of the department. The first officers she encountered greeted her politely, but there was a trace of nervousness in their voices. The younger officer, the one who had seemed so unsure during the traffic stop, approached her slowly. "Good morning, Chief," he said, his voice slightly shaky. She looked at him with kind eyes and nodded. "Good morning. Thank you for your greeting," she replied, her tone calm but firm. She wanted them to feel respected, even as they learned an important lesson about perception and bias. She called a brief meeting with the officers to discuss the events of the previous day. The room was quiet, the hum of air conditioning the only background sound. She began speaking, her voice steady and even, without anger or judgment. "Yesterday, there was a situation that could have been handled differently," she said. "It is important to acknowledge when assumptions affect our actions, not because we are bad people, but because we must always be aware of our perceptions and how they influence our decisions." She paused for a moment, allowing the words to settle. Many officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had not realized how quickly bias could influence even routine decisions. She continued, "This is not about blame. It is about awareness and growth. Every encounter, no matter how small, matters. How we treat people reflects who we are and the values of this department." Her words were simple, yet they carried weight. She did not lecture or humiliate anyone. Instead, she spoke from experience, from a place of understanding and empathy. She knew what it felt like to be judged unfairly, to have assumptions made about her based on appearance, and she wanted the officers to understand that their actions, however unintentional, could impact lives in profound ways. After the meeting, she spent time reviewing reports and planning her first community initiatives. She believed that building trust with the community started with small, consistent actions. She wanted her department to be seen as approachable, fair, and just. She made notes about outreach programs, neighborhood meetings, and ways to involve citizens in shaping the safety and well-being of their town. Each idea was grounded in respect, transparency, and the understanding that real change comes from connection, not authority alone. During a brief break, she walked through the station, greeting officers individually. Some smiled nervously, others simply nodded. She spoke to each one as a person, not just a colleague or subordinate. "How is your day going?" she asked a young officer who seemed tense. "It's going well, Chief," he replied, still cautious. "Good," she said, offering a small smile. "Remember, every day is an opportunity to do better, to understand more, and to lead with integrity." Later, she met with the supervisor who had handled the call during the traffic stop. They discussed the situation in detail, not to assign blame, but to reflect on how similar incidents could be prevented in the future. The supervisor admitted that he had been caught off guard and had not considered the possibility that the driver was someone significant. She listened carefully and then spoke, her words measured and constructive. We cannot always predict every situation, but we can train ourselves to see clearly, to act thoughtfully, and to remember that respect comes first. By midday, she had already made an impression on the department. Officers who had been skeptical or hesitant began to observe her leadership style more closely. They noticed how she handled challenges with composure, how she communicated without condescension, and how she sought understanding before judgment. Her presence was a quiet reminder that leadership was not about asserting power, but about inspiring confidence, trust, and respect. In the afternoon, she scheduled a brief community visit. She wanted to meet with residents, listen to their concerns, and show that the department was committed to partnership and accountability. She walked through familiar streets, greeted shopkeepers and neighbors, and listened carefully as people shared their thoughts. Some spoke cautiously, unsure how to address the new chief. Others were eager to express hope that positive change was coming. She responded with empathy and honesty, acknowledging past challenges while emphasizing her commitment to fairness and transparency. During one conversation, a local resident asked her about her experiences as a Black woman in law enforcement. She spoke openly, sharing the challenges she had faced, the determination that had driven her, and the vision she held for a department that could serve everyone equitably. Her words resonated deeply. People saw her not just as a figure of authority, but as a person who understood their struggles, a leader who had faced obstacles and emerged resilient. Returning to the station, she reflected on the morning's events, the traffic stop, the lessons learned, the conversations with her officers, and the interactions with the community all reinforced her mission. Leadership, she realized, was not about enforcing rules or maintaining order alone. It was about empathy, patience, and the ability to guide others toward understanding and fairness. She felt a quiet determination settle within her. She had been chosen for this role because of her resilience, her integrity, and her ability to inspire change. She spent the rest of the afternoon in planning sessions, mapping out initiatives to improve communication within the department and with the community. She wanted officers to understand that their actions mattered, not just in high-profile cases, but in everyday encounters. She emphasized training, mentorship, and accountability, ensuring that each officer would have the tools to act thoughtfully and respectfully in all situations. Even as the day drew to a close, she remained engaged, reviewing notes, sending messages, and considering ways to strengthen the department's relationships. She understood that change would not happen overnight. It would take time, persistence, and consistent effort, but she was prepared for the challenge. Her own journey had taught her resilience, and she knew that her example could inspire others to grow and improve. As evening approached, she walked through the station one last time, observing the officers preparing to leave. Some lingered, curious about her plans and leadership style. She spoke to them quietly, reinforcing her belief in respect, fairness, and empathy. She reminded them that each interaction with the community was an opportunity to build trust, to learn, and to demonstrate integrity. Driving home, she thought about the events of the day. She had faced challenges, navigated awkward situations, and taken steps toward positive change. She knew there would be more difficult moments ahead, moments that would test her patience, judgment, and leadership. Yet she felt confident in her approach. She believed in the power of calm, measured responses, in the importance of empathy, and in the strength that came from experience and resilience. At home, she took a quiet moment to reflect on her journey. From her childhood, where she learned to face the world with courage, to her years of training and dedication, every step had prepared her for this role. She thought about the officers she had met, the community she served, and the lessons she wanted to impart. Leadership was not just about holding a position of authority. It was about inspiring, guiding, and fostering understanding. As night fell, she felt a sense of calm determination. The journey ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but she was ready. She had faced bias, misunderstanding, and doubt before, and she had learned to navigate them with grace. Now, as chief, she could shape the culture of her department, influence her officers, and build stronger connections with her community. Her story, she realized, was not just her own. It belonged to everyone who had faced obstacles, who had been underestimated, and who had persevered despite challenges. She carried their experiences with her, using them to guide her actions, decisions, and leadership style. She knew that true change required patience, empathy, and consistent effort. Before turning in for the night, she reviewed her plans for the next day. Meetings, community outreach, and training sessions awaited her. She thought about the officers who had been part of the traffic stop and how she could continue to mentor and guide them. She knew that moments like that, though awkward or uncomfortable, were opportunities for growth, for her, her officers, and the community alike. Finally, she closed her notebook and took a deep breath. The city outside was quiet, the lights twinkling softly, a reminder of the lives she was there to serve. She felt a quiet sense of purpose, knowing that her work mattered, that her presence could make a difference, and that her resilience could inspire others. With that thought, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready to face them with the same calm, steady determination that had guided her through every step of her journey. Her life had not always been easy. Long before she became the chief of the police department, she had grown up in a neighborhood where life was a series of challenges. The streets were familiar but not always safe. There were people who struggled to make ends meet, families who worried constantly, and a community that had learned to survive rather than thrive. She had learned early that life would test her, and the only way to navigate it was with courage, patience, and determination. Her parents had always emphasized respect, hard work, and the importance of standing tall no matter what happened. Her father, a quiet and thoughtful man, had often said, "Life will judge you before it knows you. Make sure you never let that stop you." Her mother had added, "Strength isn't just about fighting back. It's about understanding, learning, and choosing the right path even when it is hard." These lessons shaped her from a young age, teaching her that resilience was not just about surviving, but about thriving and lifting others along the way. School had been both a sanctuary and a battleground. She loved learning and excelled in her studies, but she also faced challenges that came from being different. Teachers sometimes doubted her, peers sometimes underestimated her, and there were moments when she felt invisible. Yet she refused to let those moments define her. She pushed herself harder, studied longer, and reminded herself that her worth was not determined by others' opinions. Every small success became fuel for her determination, and every setback became a lesson in patience and perseverance. By the time she was a teenager, she had already decided that she wanted to make a difference in her community. She wanted to be someone who could inspire trust, provide safety, and act as a role model for young people who, like her, had faced obstacles and doubts. Law enforcement appealed to her not because of authority or power, but because it was a way to be a force for positive change. She wanted to be part of something bigger than herself, something that mattered. Her early years on the job were far from easy. She started in a small precinct, handling calls that were often difficult, chaotic, and emotionally draining. People yelled, cried, or refused to cooperate. The work was exhausting, both physically and mentally, yet she approached each situation with calm and determination. She learned to listen carefully, to read people's emotions, and to act decisively when necessary. She began to understand that policing was not just about rules or procedures. It was about human connection, empathy, and judgment. She quickly realized that being a woman in law enforcement, and a black woman at that, presented additional challenges. Some colleagues questioned her abilities, assuming she couldn't handle difficult situations. Some citizens doubted her authority or underestimated her presence, but she refused to be discouraged. Instead, she let her work speak for itself. She responded with competence, integrity, and patience. Over time, she earned respect through her actions rather than demanding it through words. She understood that real leadership was not about proving oneself in anger or frustration, but by consistently demonstrating skill, fairness, and compassion. There were moments that stayed with her, moments that tested her resilience in ways she could never forget. She remembered one call early in her career where a young boy had been caught in a dangerous situation. His fear was palpable, and the adults around him were overwhelmed and unsure how to help. She stayed calm, spoke gently to the child, and guided the situation with patience and care. When it was over, the boy's parents thanked her, tears in their eyes. It was in moments like that that she understood why she had chosen this path. The impact of her presence, her choices, and her ability to remain steady could change lives. She also faced moments of frustration and injustice. There were times when bias and prejudice in the system made her work harder, when she had to navigate assumptions that had nothing to do with her abilities but everything to do with others' perceptions. She learned to remain steadfast, to focus on what she could control, and to advocate for fairness wherever she could. She became skilled at mentoring younger officers, especially those who struggled with understanding the importance of empathy and integrity in policing. Years passed, and she continued to grow in her career. Promotions came not because she demanded them, but because her leadership, judgment, and dedication were impossible to ignore. She became known for her fairness, her ability to handle crises with calm efficiency, and her talent for inspiring trust among both officers and the community. Each step she took toward leadership was accompanied by reflection, hard work, and an unwavering commitment to the principles she had learned as a child. Her appointment as chief had been a milestone, a culmination of years of dedication, struggle, and resilience. But she knew it was not the end of her journey. It was just the beginning. Leadership at this level required more than managing tasks or enforcing rules. It required vision, understanding, and the ability to guide a department through change while staying true to the values of justice, respect, and empathy. She embraced the responsibility, knowing that her actions would set the tone for the entire department. She remembered the early days of her training, when instructors had stressed the importance of community engagement. She had listened carefully and realized that real policing went beyond enforcing laws. It involved building trust, understanding the needs of citizens, and creating an environment where people felt safe and valued. This philosophy stayed with her, shaping the initiatives she would later implement as chief. She wanted officers to see the humanity in every person they encountered, and to understand that respect and communication were just as important as enforcement. Family support had also played a critical role in her journey. Her parents had instilled values of resilience, respect, and determination. Friends and mentors had encouraged her when challenges seemed overwhelming. Colleagues who had once doubted her gradually became allies, recognizing the integrity, fairness, and skill she brought to every situation. Each relationship, each lesson, and each challenge strengthened her, preparing her for the position she now held. She had also learned the importance of patience. Change did not happen overnight, whether within a department, a community, or oneself. She had witnessed officers struggle with outdated habits, community members hesitant to trust, and systemic issues that resisted easy solutions. Yet she had learned that persistence, consistency, and quiet determination could move mountains over time. Leadership required the ability to wait, to guide, and to act with both firmness and compassion. The story of the traffic stop from the previous day now made sense in the context of her life. It was a small moment, but it reflected larger truths about human nature, perception, and bias. Even trained officers could make assumptions, even those meant to protect could misjudge, and even authority could be challenged by appearances. Her calm handling of the situation was not accidental. It was a product of years of preparation, experience, and self-discipline. She had learned to navigate difficult encounters with composure, to assert herself when necessary, and to teach through action rather than confrontation. As chief, she now had the platform to extend those lessons to others. She could mentor officers, guide community engagement, and implement policies that reflected her values. She knew that her presence alone was symbolic, representing resilience, fairness, and the possibility of positive change. But she also knew that real impact required effort, planning, and the ability to listen as much as to act. She was ready for that challenge. Her personal journey was intertwined with the mission she had accepted as chief. She had faced bias and doubt, navigated complex human interactions, and remained steadfast in her pursuit of justice. She understood that leadership was not a static position. It was a continuous process of learning, adapting, and inspiring others to act with integrity. Each day brought new lessons, and she was committed to embracing them with clarity, patience, and empathy. Even in moments of solitude, she reflected on the people who had influenced her. Teachers, mentors, colleagues, family members, and community leaders had all shaped her understanding of what it meant to serve, to lead, and to endure. She carried their wisdom with her, applying it to the challenges of her new role, and striving to honor their guidance through her actions. She also thought about the young people in her community. She wanted them to see that resilience, hard work, and integrity could open doors even when the world seemed unfair. She wanted them to understand that leadership was not about seeking power, but about creating positive impact, helping others, and standing strong in the face of adversity. Her life story, her journey to this point, could serve as a beacon for those who needed guidance, hope, or inspiration. The events of the day reminded her of one simple truth. Leadership was as much about the small moments as the big ones. A single encounter, a single word, or a single decision could shape perceptions, build trust, or change a life. She had learned to treat every interaction with care, every challenge with thoughtfulness, and every opportunity as a chance to lead by example. As the sun began to set, she sat quietly in her office, reviewing the events that had led her here. The traffic stop, the lessons with her officers, the reflections on her journey. They all formed a tapestry of experiences that had prepared her for this role. She understood the significance of each moment, the importance of empathy, and the need to act with integrity in all situations. Her story was far from over. There would be more challenges, more difficult conversations, and moments that tested her patience and judgment. But she felt ready. She had faced obstacles, overcome doubt, and built a foundation of resilience that would guide her through the days ahead. She knew that leadership was not about perfection, but about commitment, courage, and the willingness to learn from every experience. Before leaving for the evening, she made notes for the next day. She planned meetings, community outreach, and training sessions, all with the goal of fostering understanding, respect, and fairness. She knew that her role was not just to enforce rules, but to inspire growth, guide her officers, and build trust with the community she served. Every decision mattered, every interaction counted, and she was determined to lead with both strength and compassion. As she turned off the lights and left the station, the quiet streets reflected the calm determination she carried within her. Her past, her experiences, and her resilience had all brought her to this point. The journey had been difficult, but it had prepared her for the work that lay ahead. She walked with confidence, knowing that the lessons she had learned, the strength she had developed, and the vision she held would guide her in making a real, lasting difference. Her life story was a testament to the power of resilience, patience, and unwavering determination. Every struggle, every challenge, every moment of doubt had shaped her into the leader she had become. And as chief, she knew that she could now use that strength to influence others, to inspire change, and to create a department and a community built on fairness, respect, and trust. Her first day in charge as chief had passed, but she knew the real challenges were only beginning. Leadership was more than a title. It was action, responsibility, and guiding a team through change. She arrived at the station early the next morning, the familiar hum of the building greeting her. Officers were already preparing for the day, some exchanging quiet glances, others moving with purpose. She could feel the subtle tension in the air. Some officers were still adjusting to the idea of a new chief, a woman who had already proven strength, patience, and integrity. She began her morning with a quick walk through the station. She greeted officers individually, asking how they were and listening carefully to their responses. Some hesitated, unsure how to speak with her, while others shared small updates or concerns. She made mental notes, recognizing that every interaction was an opportunity to build trust and show leadership. Small gestures like asking questions and genuinely listening could create bonds that orders alone could not. By mid-morning, she gathered the entire department for a meeting. The room was quiet, officers sitting in careful rows, some leaning forward, others stiffly seated. She took a moment to look at each face before speaking. "Today I want to talk about why we are here," she began, her voice calm but firm. "We are here not just to enforce rules, but to serve our community. Every action we take matters. How we treat people, how we communicate, and how we respond can either build trust or break it. Our goal is to build trust," she continued, sharing the story of the traffic stop from a few days earlier. She did not use it to embarrass anyone, but as a lesson in perception, bias, and empathy. "Mistakes happen," she said. "What matters is how we learn from them. Every person deserves respect. Every decision should be thoughtful, and every action reflects who we are as a department. We are responsible for our community, and that responsibility begins with how we see each other and the people we serve." There was silence after she spoke, the kind that comes when people realize the depth of the message. Some officers looked at the floor, embarrassed by past assumptions, while others reflected on their own interactions with citizens. Her calm demeanor, her clarity, and her focus on learning rather than punishment made the message resonate. She was not there to dictate but to guide, to help her team see the importance of integrity, respect, and empathy in their work. After the meeting, she began the day's operational tasks. She reviewed schedules, assigned officers to patrols, and checked reports. Yet her attention remained on the human side of policing. She spoke with dispatchers, listened to their concerns, and encouraged feedback. She made rounds through the holding area, greeting everyone with respect and ensuring that processes were fair and humane. Every detail mattered, from paperwork to human interactions. She believed that leadership was demonstrated not just in big decisions, but in small, consistent actions. Later, she met with a group of officers who had struggled with bias in past incidents. She spoke with them privately, sharing strategies for effective communication, empathy, and awareness. She encouraged them to reflect on their actions, understand their assumptions, and commit to improvement. She did not lecture but ask questions, guiding them to self-awareness. "Think about the people you interact with," she said. "What do they see? How do they feel? How can you make their experience better?" Her questions were simple but powerful, prompting reflection and growth. By afternoon, she had planned a community engagement session. She wanted officers to understand the neighborhoods they served and to build relationships with the people there. She led the team to a local community center, where residents had gathered to meet her. Some were hesitant, unsure how to approach the new chief, while others were curious and eager to share concerns. She listened patiently, nodding, asking questions, and showing genuine interest in their stories. Her presence was calm, approachable, and respectful, creating an atmosphere where people felt safe and heard. During the session, a resident spoke about a recent neighborhood problem that had not been addressed. She listened carefully, taking notes, and asked follow-up questions. "Thank you for sharing this," she said. "We need to understand the challenges you face to respond effectively. Our job is not just to enforce rules, but to work with the community to create solutions that work for everyone." Her words were not rehearsed. They came from experience, empathy, and a deep commitment to fairness. The officers accompanying her watched closely. They noticed the difference in her approach, how she listened without judgment, how she valued input, and how she used every opportunity to teach. Some officers began to reflect on their own methods, recognizing areas for growth. Leadership, they realized, was not about authority alone. It was about guiding, inspiring, and modeling the behavior expected in every interaction. After returning to the station, she held a debriefing session with her officers. She encouraged them to share their thoughts and observations from the community visit. Some were hesitant at first, but as she listened without judgment, they began to open up. They discussed what they had learned about communication, empathy, and the importance of understanding community needs. She guided the conversation carefully, highlighting lessons and reinforcing positive behavior. Later in the day, she reviewed internal reports that pointed to recurring issues in how some officers approached certain neighborhoods. Instead of assigning blame, she used the information to create a plan for training and mentorship. She wanted her team to understand that patterns of behavior could be improved through awareness, practice, and reflection. She emphasized that accountability was not punishment, but a path to growth. Every officer, she reminded them, had the ability to improve and to set an example for others. Her afternoon was also filled with meetings with department supervisors, discussing policy updates and ways to ensure fairness and consistency in all operations. She approached each discussion with respect, seeking input while guiding decisions with clarity and purpose. Her leadership style was inclusive yet firm. She believed that collaboration, combined with clear values and expectations, would create a stronger, more effective department. By evening, she walked through the station again, observing officers wrapping up their duties. Some approached her with questions, seeking advice or guidance.